5 Bikes in 5 Days, the series where I take 5 bikes, one per day, unbox, assemble, ride, and then give my day one impression. No retakes, no room for error. Welcome to day 4 and the BikesOnline.com product, and I've reviewed one other bike from this company, the Polygon Cascade D7. It was awesome and it was painful to have to send that back after the review. Because I've seen their boxing before, I won't go into that, but I will say they protect the product nicely, and now they've got a snazzy new accessory kit. It has a nice layout, nice presentation, tools for assembly, and even a keychain. The bike they sent for review today, another Polygon, a hardtail this time, the Cascade 4, a $499 bike. The color, they call this mint, so mint green with dark green and orange graphics. Day one impressions, let's get right to it with the component rundown. Starting with the bars, 680 millimeters. Now these are riser bars, they're steel and they're not my style of riser, but whatever works. It's nice to see a stem that's not a mile long. The specs say 45 millimeters, but this looks shorter. It's Entity branded. As are the grips. You'll see lots of Entity on Polygons. I think it's a house brand, and it's decent stuff. It's on par with Bontrager. The shifters, they're Shimano trigger shifters, a 3-speed on the left and an 8 on the right, making 24 speeds for this bike. There are hydraulic brakes, but they're Alhonga branded per their specs. They look to be of decent quality, at least visually, so we'll see. The rotors, 160mm front and rear, and these two are generic, but when wiping them down, they are nice and smooth. Here's a look at the brakes at the rear, where you can also see that there is a quick release for the rear and the front. Opinionated topic here, the head tube. This is a straight tube semi-integrated, and it's getting harder to justify these straight tubes, even on a $500 bike, but they are still hanging around. The straight steer fork, that's an SR Sun Tour with dual preload controls, no lockout. There are 28mm stanchions with 100mm of travel. The sticker gives that away. And the model reveals the stanchion size XCE28. These are very common on this class of bikes. No name or spec provided for these hubs, but the wheels are branded GA18. They're 27.5 inches, double-walled alloy rims with Schrader valves. And the tires around them, 27.5 by 2.10. These are trail knobbies, but the kind that are also friendly on the street. As for the frame, nice welds, it has a good painted finish, and it's branded with AL 6 series markings at 6061 aluminum. And all the graphics, they're clear-coated, again the color, mint, green, and orange, kind of a KevCentral orange. It's a nice looking frame with only one problem. They were supposed to send a medium, but I received a small, which is going to affect this review, but we'll get into that in a minute. I'm not exactly sure what class 3 is in a non-e-bike, but it's on this cable. Now, one of these cables, this one, I do need to zip tie over, but there are two that come from the rear that are too long for this small frame. Other components, a quick release seat post clamp, an Entity Sport 27.2mm seat post capped with a, if you say anything other than Entity mountain bike saddle, you would be wrong. At the drivetrain, platform pedals, plastic, 170mm crank arms, alloy, and a Pro Wheel stamped and riveted 3x crankset, 42, 34, 24, the usual. The specs say that this front derailleur should be an Altus, but this one is an Acera, so bonus, 1 up. The specs also say Altus for the rear, but here's a Tourney TX. Now to be fair, there is a part shortage, but if I had to swap something out, I would put the Tourney up front and the Acera at the rear. This is a day one impression, so I'm still unboxing as I go. So a downgrade with a Tourney at the rear. Fortunately, the gears above it are a cassette. A Shimano HG200 11 to 32 tooth cassette. Need rear rack mount points? It's got them, and if a kickstand is your fancy, it has that too. This is the part where normally I would be looking forward to the ride, but with this small frame, even with the seat post at its max height, my knees are in danger of whacking the handlebars on every turn, but I'm working with what I have and trying to protect my knees, but I think with a short ride I can give you an idea of how this would handle out of the box, or at least the idea of how it would handle out of the box. Important because direct-to-consumer brands, all the service and setup is on you. The first impressions, the Sun Tour XCE, it performs as expected. The Tourney at the back, it's noisy as Tourneys are, and early on a chain drop, which also happens with Tourneys from time to time, but don't underestimate them because they're tougher than many people give them credit for. That said, it's a fact, they are noisy and periodically drop the chain, and I want to protect the chainstay on this bike, and there's a reason. Because when I realized Bikes Online had sent a small, they told me they would send a medium in its place, but I informed them of a local rider that had crashed their bike and was currently bikeless. He's been borrowing his girlfriend's bike. Bikes Online didn't miss a beat. They instructed me to donate this bike to that person as soon as I'm finished with the review, hence me trying to protect it and leaving some stickers on. So props to Bikes Online. Picking back up post chain drop, which by the way didn't happen again, even though this is a short ride. Still, it didn't happen again. But the ride level of this bike, it's on par with entry-level local bike shop bikes, at least ones with similar equipment. But it is worth note that even those bikes are under slowly increasing pressure from big box offerings like the new bikes from Schwinn. Let's talk climbing, which is boring, but as a new rider, it can be a struggle. And even in high gear and trying to pump up a hill, there are no jumped gears or drivetrain issues with this Polygon. And remember, I didn't tune anything, this is straight out of the box. And out of the box, no clearance issues of any kind, and as much as I rip on 3x drivetrains, for this 33-pound bike, considering how it's spec'd, it does a decent job. Climbing is somewhat tolerable. I just mentioned that I didn't adjust anything out of the box, and this front derailleur, this is why I don't like 3x's. It shifts just fine, but it does need some tweaking, and this is an important note since buyers need to consider that they're going to have to be their own mechanic. Another factor with direct-to-consumer brands, and also why I like 1x, so you don't have to mess with it. Noises aside, on the faster and hardpack sections of the trail, even with me being cramped on this tiny frame, it's still fun and easy to ride, and I would say does a respectable job, or respectably usable job. And this is where I want to get some footage over rougher areas or taking some harder turns, but this is going to be as good as it gets for this video because I sit too tall on this tiny frame. And I learned long ago not to push it if I feel even the least bit uncomfortable because bad things can happen. Plus the position I'm in, the way I'm hunched over, my knees are taking all of the bouncing. I have enough of an idea to give you a summary, some likes and dislikes of this Cascade 4 from Polygon. I'll kick off with the likes in this frame. Quality-wise, not size-wise, it's nice looking, it seems to be well made, and there's enough room here for possibly some wider tires. The fork, because it's on par with what I expect at this price, and because it doesn't have much flex, which is good. Wheels also in line with my expectations because they're quick release and they're not overly heavy. And these hydraulic brakes, I don't like that they're some off-brand, but they are hydraulics that work, so okay. And I'm going to give a thumbs up to all the Entity components. They seem well made and they're very good for OEM parts, and this saddle, decently comfortable. And I can't skip over the cassette and that Acera up front. I'm going to add a neutral in here, and it's going to be this 3x, and it's only neutral because so many other bikes in this same category have a similar setup, so I'm just being fair. And based on the same logic, I could put the Tourney in neutral, but I'm going to put it in dislikes because there's supposed to be an Altus here. Another dislike, external cable routing I'm okay with, but the one size somewhat but really doesn't fit all cable links, not so much. And I'm wondering if they're using the same logic for their chain sizing, one chain fits all, because this is pretty loose. So even with the small frame, I was able to get a pretty good idea about this bike. And at $499, if everything were properly tuned and set up, I can potentially see it. Because those $570 bikes this is trying to compete with, well, they're now well over $600. So $499 could potentially be a steal for roughly the same component list. Is this enough to sway someone? Well, that's up to you, so I want to hear your opinions on it. Is this Cascade 4 worth $499? Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure that notification bell is active and give this video a thumbs up. Have a great day.